Hello, welcome to your academy. At your academy, we have been dealing with the General Prologue to the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. We have dealt with quite a number of portraits from the General Prologue. If you want to watch the lecture on any of the character or portrait from the General Prologue, you can check out this link. It will take you to the playlist section of the General Prologue. In today's lecture, we will deal with the portrait of the Parson. Now, to tell you about this man, the Parson, he is one and only character who is associated with church, who is related to church, and whose portrait is presented to us by Chaucer positively, in a positive manner. We have read the portrait of prioress, we have read the portrait of monk, we have read the portrait of friar, and we found that they were not good religious men. They would not do their duties as they were supposed to do. Rather, they were in contrast to what they stood for. They were worldly, they were, lustful, they were materialistics, they were after the wealth, so they had little to do with their being monk, with their being friar, with their being nun. But here is a person who is religious in the true sense of the word. Let's read his portrait and see how he appeared to Geoffrey Chaucer, or the poet, or the pilgrim. There was a good man of religion too, a country parson, poor, I warrant you. Now look how he begins. Parson basically is a clergyman to whom the church would usually assign a small parish, village or town, and he exercises or serves his duties in that particular parish. So there was with us a good man of religion too. And this too tells us that Geoffrey Chaucer was aware that most of the portraits that I have written so far about the church, I have written them not right. I have told no good things about them. So he's telling us there was one good man also. Don't think that all the men related to church, associated with church, were bad. There was one good man also, and he was a country parson. He was very poor, I warrant you. I tell you, I guarantee this, that he was poor. Now this poor and good are in contrast to the bad and richness of the prioress, of the monk, of the friar discussed earlier. But rich he was in holy thought and work. He was a learned man also, a clerk. He was very rich in thought and work. He was poor materially, but he was not poor when it came to knowledge. He was rich, he was wise, he was great. He was a clerk, he was a scholar. Now you should remember the character or portrait of the clerk of the Oxford, who was well read. So our parson is also well read, who Christ's own gospel truly sought to preach. Devoutly his parishioners would he teach. Now he was the one who had studied the Christ's gospel. The gospel is that part of the Bible in which the sayings of Jesus Christ are mentioned. If you read the Gospel of John, Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Luke, all these Gospels, all these books include direct sayings of Jesus Christ, peace be upon him. So he knew the teachings of Jesus Christ, and he would teach those teachings to his parishioners, to those who came under his clergymanship, or in his boundary, in his area. He taught them quite well. And truly and rightly benign he was, and wondrous diligent, patient in adverse times, and well content. Now look at again the choice of adjectives. I have told you quite a number of times that when we are reading the portraits from the prologue, we need to keep a close look rather, at the choice of words that Geoffrey Chaucer uses. Benign means kind, means diligent, means gentle. Diligent means hard-working. careful about one's duties. So these two are great words which describe the parson to us. He is gentle, benign, kind, and he is diligent, careful, hardworking, punctual about his duties. He is patient in adverse times and well content. Now that is a characteristic feature of a noble man, of a religious man, of a patient man, that when hard times fall upon him, when difficult times fall upon him, when sufferings fall upon him, he is patient. He faces them with perseverance, with patience. Parson is patient and he is content with whatever he has, in whatever situation he is. That is another characteristic of a noble, of a benign person, or for that matter a religious person. As he was oft times proven always blithe, he was right loath to curse to get a tithe, and this was proven fact that he was always happy. When is a person happy? When he is content. So this parson was content and he was happy. He was not willing to curse a person for a tithe. Now tithe is a small amount of money. What friar would usually do, if you remember the portrait of friar, he could go to any extent for a small amount of money, for a tithe, for a penny. But our parson is not like that. He would not do any bad act, any sinful act for money or for material good, but rather would he give, in case of doubt, unto those poor parishioners about. In contrast to, taking money from people, he would give. He was charitable. Friar was not charitable, he was a beggar. But parson is not like that. Parson gives to poor parishioners. If there is anyone in need, he helps them. He's not like friar that who can go and take money from anyone and everyone. Part of his income, even of his goods, enough with little, colored all his moods. Whatever he had, his income, which was not very large, he would give of that income to those poor parishioners, whosoever was in need. And these little acts of kindness were enough to cheer him up, to keep him always blithe, to keep him always happy, content. Wide was his parish, houses far asunder, but never did he fail for rain or thunder. Wide was his parish. His area was huge, was large, far asunder, to far off places, but never did he fail to reach his parishioners. He would always be there if any of his parishioner was in need, whether it was rain or it was thunder, whatever the climate was, whatever the season was, whatever the weather was, whether it was good or bad, our parson would never fail to reach his parishioners. In sickness or in sin or any state, to visit to the farthest, small and great, whether someone was sick, whether someone had to, to ask for forgiveness, had committed any sin and had to make a confession, the parson would be there, and he visited all, whether they were small or great. Now this small or great means whether they were rich or poor. Friar did not. Friar said that it is better to meet those who are rich. It's waste of time to meet with the poor, but not the parson. He would go to everyone, whether he was rich or he was poor. Going afoot and in his hand a stave, this fine example to his flock he gave. He would visit on foot. He also would not ride the horse, and in his hand he would carry a stick. And by doing this, he gives a good example to other people. Now, this portrait of the parson is an exemplary portrait. In contrast to others, the monk has to be like the parson, friar has to be like the parson, nun has to be like the parson. Parson is setting an example, a benchmark for them. For that matter, Chaucer is setting his own benchmark for the parson. Now, I would like to tell you here one more thing, that there are some critics who believe that this portrait of Parson was based on Wycliffe. Wycliffe was the first man who is a contemporary of Geoffrey Chaucer who translated Bible into English. He was a prose writer. Wycliffe. But there are some critics who say that his portrait was not based on the character of Wycliffe, but Lalore, and this Lalore was another an important person from Geoffrey Chaucer's times, and later, the host also refers to Parson as Lalaurie, and people say that this is perhaps because his portrait was molded on Lalore. First he wrought, and afterwards he taught out of the gospel, then that text he caught. This is another good art of conversation. First think and then speak. First we should weigh our words and then we should speak. And this is what the parson did. He first gave a good thought to what he has to say, and then he said. And he first read the Bible, the text, and understood it, and then he preached, then he taught. He did not, taught to the people without learning first or studying first. And this figure he added thereunto, that if gold rusts, what shall poor iron do? And he would always tell in his sermons to the people, he would add it to that. Thereunto means that, to add to. That if gold rusts, what shall iron do? What is gold? Gold here represents the people related to the church, because it is they who are in charge of making people morally strong, giving them good education. And if that rusts, if they are lustful, if they are immoral, if they are corrupt, if they are sinful, if they are materialistic, then what about the iron? What about those people who have never been in touch with education, with the religious education, with the church? We cannot blame them. For if the priests be foul, in whom we trust, what wonder if a layman yield to lust? If priests be foul, if our priests be like those of friar, like those of monk, like those of others, that it is no wonder, it is no strange thing that a layman yields to lust. That a layman is lustful, he is sinful, he is materialistic. It is but natural. When our clergy is foul, when our clergy is corrupt, our society cannot be good. And shame it is if priests take thought for keep, a shitty shepherd shepherding clean sheep. Keep here is a word for the whore, for the harlot. He says that if our priests keep a thought for keep, if they think that they should indulge in the lustful thought, it's a bad habit. It's a shitty shepherd, bad clergyman. Shepherd here, if you remember, shepherd is also used in Bible for prophet Moses. He was a shepherd, and he was in charge of the people of Israel. He was supposed to make them good, and he is taking that a clergyman, a priest, has to be a good shepherd. He cannot be a bad shepherd. And if he is a bad shepherd, he is not going to have clean sheep. He is not going to have a good society. Well ought a priest example good to give, by his own cleanness how his flock should live. So a priest has to be exemplary. It is his lifestyle, his conduct, his attitude which his followers do follow. If he is corrupt, if he is like monk, like friar, other people are going to be like that. If they are like parson, the whole society is going to be like the parson. So what Geoffrey Chaucer is basically telling us here, through the opinions of Parson, he is telling us his own opinions. Many people believe that Geoffrey Chaucer was a Reformationist. He had seen the Reformation, which would take quite some time to happen in England, but he had foreseen that Reformation, and he is telling how that Reformation will come. We have to reform the church, and the Reformation will come when we have the people like Parson in the church, and we throw the people like monks and friars out of the church. Only then we can have a reformed society, a better society. He never let his benefice for hire, leaving his flock to flounder in the mire. He would never betray his parishioners, is what this means. When they were in need, when they were sick, when they were in depression, the parson stood with them. He would never leave them in difficult times. In mire would be, mire is a swampy kind of area. In Urdu we say dal dal. It's an area where there is water and there is mud, and if a person is caught in this mire, it is very difficult to come out of it. If he moves, he sinks downwards, sinks. The more one moves in mire, the more he sinks deeper into it. But this parson never left his parishioners in such a state, or what we say in contemporary times, in a catch-22 scenario, and ran to London up to old St. Paul's to get himself a chantry for the souls. So what this parson did, he often went to St. Paul church or cathedral in London, which would be far away from his own parish, and he went there to bring or to pray for the souls of his parishioners, for either the deceased souls of his parishioners or those who are still alive, and would pray for their health and pray for their wealth. Nor in some brotherhood did he withhold, but dwelt at home and kept so well the fold. Now this fold would be a run on line and would carry on to the next verse, that is, that never wolf could make his plans miscarry. But I'll stop at fold. And he says that he, nor in some brotherhood did he withhold. He would not go and, spend his days and nights in other people's houses. As we know of the friar, he would never sit in his cell, nor would monk sit in his cell. But parson does not go outside his home or cell, but dwelt at home and kept so well fold. But what our parson did, he remained at his home and remained always in a good self-esteemed state, or he would carry himself better than the rest of the people or rest of the portraits from the prologue which are related to the church. That never wolf could make his plans miscarry. He was a shepherd and not a mercenary. No one could foil his plans. He was true to his word. If he has to do something, act somewhere, meet someone, no one would foul his plans. He was a shepherd and not a mercenary. Mercenary is a person who is kind of a soldier, usually those who fight on horses. But he was a shepherd. So being a shepherd, he has different duties. Now there is another thing that I tell you about this portrait of the parson, is that he is often put together with the portrait of the knight and the portrait of plowman. There are three people, that is knight, parson and plowman. Knight fights for the security of the people, parson fights for the moral upliftment of the people, and plowman fights for the food of the people. So these three portraits exist in the prologue. We would be dealing with the portrait of plowman later. If you want to watch the lecture on the portrait of plowman, you can check out this link. These three are very important because they make a triangular and they make a complete society. And holy though he was and virtuous, to sinners he was not impetuous. There is no doubt that he was holy. It's clear from what Geoffrey Chaucer has told us. But if there was anyone who had sins, he was not very, very harsh upon them. He would rather counsel them in the best manner that he could, and would ask for their confession and would try to make them good. Nor haughty in his speech, nor too divine, but in all teaching prudent and benign. Now there are two important things. He was not haughty in his speech. Haughty means one, who would keep people fearful, or make say things which make people fearful. He was not haughty in his speech. Neither was he too divine. That is also important. What Geoffrey Chaucer is here doing, he is giving us the best portrait that a religious man has to be. He needs not to be too divine that people start calling him God. So our Parson was neither haughty, he was nor divine, but he was prudent and benign. He was sensible in his speech, in his attitude, and he was benign. He was kind and gentle. Now this benign he has used second time in the portrait of the Parson. To lead folk into heaven, but by stress of good examples was his business. What he did, he would give good examples to the people. He would discuss or talk to the people in the best manner that he can. And by doing so, he would lead them to heaven. But if some sinful one proved obstinate, be who it might, of high or low estate, him he reproved, and sharply as I know, there is nowhere a better priest I trow. But if there was some sinful who was obstinate means a person who does not listen to someone, who does what he thinks is right. If there was, him he reproved, be who it might, of high or low estate, whether he was a rich man, a poor man, of an upper class, of a lower class, whosoever it was, him he reproved, and he would correct him with harshness if he did not listen, if he was obstinate. And there was no good priest, I trow. I swear that you will not find a good priest, a better parson, a better religious man than this Parson. He had no thirst for pomp or reverence. He would not say that people should respect me, should revere me. And this is in contrast to the portrait of the Prioress. When he was dealing with the portrait of Prioress, Geoffrey Chaucer told us that she was enthusiastic, happy, overjoyed when someone revered her, someone showed respect to her. This brought a lot of happiness and smiling to her, but not for our priest, not for our Parson. He was not thirsty of this, that people should tell, wow, what a great man the Parson is. No, he had no thirst for this, nor made himself a special spiced conscience. He also had no ego. Conscience here would mean ego. He was not that egoistic that I am a parson, I am so righteous, so good, so benign, so prudent, so people should look me like that, should talk about me like that. No, he did not think of such things. But Christ's own Lord, his Apostles 12, he taught, but first he followed it themselves. The only thing he did was taught the Gospels of the Christ and the things said by the 12 disciples of the Christ. But one thing that he followed was, first he practiced himself. He was a practical or practicing Christian. He practiced them. He implemented those things, sayings, or the teachings of the Bible upon himself, and then he taught to others. This is, in short, an exemplary portrait or a benchmark for the people related to the church. Geoffrey Chaucer is presenting to us this great character of church. Whether it existed in Chaucer's times is unknown. But if it did not, Chaucer says that there must be a man like Parson. And this Parson's portrait is juxtaposed, is in contrast to the portrait of Prioress, to the portrait of monk, to the portrait of a friar, to the portrait of pardoner, to the portrait of summoner, and it exalts this character and it sets benchmark for all the rest. That is all we have at your academy today. I hope that this lecture was helpful for you and you were able to understand the portrait of the Parson. The Parson's portrait is famous, is important, and it's important for all times. Even today we need religious men like Parson. You can keep watching the lectures on the prologue. You can click here to go to the playlist section of the General Prologue. You can click here to watch the next portrait, which is on Plowman. You can click there at the top to subscribe your academy. Don't forget to share, like and comment on the videos of your academy. For more interesting stuff, keep watching your academy.